doesn't it seem like people on the left are even to the point of telling you what words you can use, not even saying what you can question or not, but what words you can use to express yourself? That's what worries me sometimes. And words are powerful, so that bothers me. I mean, we spend more time, is this someone experiencing homelessness or is this a homeless person? I worry that we sometimes, and I'm the first one to say words are powerful, but I worry sometimes that when we're saying, we're not going to call this a felon, we're going to say this is someone that has experienced the justice system. Seriously, they don't want to have an admissions office. They want to say this is the office of registry or something because they want people to feel rejected. I mean, come on. We've gone too far in this. People need to feel rejection sometimes. That's how they toughen up and work harder so the next time they're not rejected. I worry sometimes that we're focusing on the wrong things. Instead of worrying about how we describe the homelessness, let's fix it. I don't care so much what we call it as I do getting this person off the street, out of the elements, and a path to becoming a contributing member of society so they can be proud of who they are and find a way back to their life again. I mean, that, to me, deserves more focus than how it's being labeled. And not that that is not worthy of some consideration, but sometimes it seems to be the focus of the consideration.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so, again, I'll be bipartisan here. So I remember when Dick Cheney used to do this, and he said, oh, no, we're not calling it torture anymore. It's now enhanced interrogation.
Yeah, well, come on.
Come on, right? So,
yeah.
So now the left is doing it. So they started saying, no, you don't say homeless anymore. You say unhoused. Why? Well, it's the same exact thing.
Does it make you less cold?
Yeah, it doesn't give him a blanket if you call him unhoused instead of homeless, right? I mean, why? What are we doing here? What are we doing? So, like, if you find an offensive word, here, I'll give you an example, like redskin. Okay, no, that's offensive because you're labeling their skin color, and it's a thing that they definitely do not like, do not want. Okay, but then we go to Native American. Okay, good, great, wonderful. Okay, now, no, First people or indigenous people. Guys, Native Americans, fine. Like, it's not offensive, 1%. Why are we constantly changing every frickin' word? And then if someone hasn't caught up to your fourth change, this is the most important part. Then you shame them and you scold them.
Yeah.
And you say that they're immoral because they hadn't caught up on your thesaurus and what we're calling homeless folks and Native Americans.
Yeah, and that glossary changes sometimes so fast that you better be dialed in, particularly if you're on the air like we are. You better check that glossary before you start the show because it could have changed since last night.
That's right. And I've been canceled by every part of the political spectrum, and that's one of the things they cancel you over. But let me give you a personal example. So my name is Cenk Uygur, but the C is pronounced like a J, which is unusual. It's a Turkish name, and you don't see that in English. You don't see that in America. So some folks on the left would say, if somebody says Cenk instead of Cenk, that's harming you, or that's a microaggression. No, it's called they don't know that a C is pronounced as a J in Turkish, and why the heck would they know that? Like, for God's sake, oh, you said the Kamala Harris is the name the wrong way. Who cares?
Well, you are a delicate flower.
Yeah, I might break if you say, if you pronounce my name wrong. I mean, how are they supposed to know it's pronounced Uyghur? Besides which, it isn't. We made that up just so people could say it. It's actually Uyghur. I'm not going to try to force Americans to say Uyghur. Come on. Be reasonable, for God's sake.
Yeah, we focus on the wrong things sometimes. I love the fact that we come from seemingly different points of view, but can sit here and have a conversation like this. People don't know, but we've probably spent, 4 hours together today? We had lunch, we talked about things, got to know each other better. When I was on your show, we spent more time out in the parking lot talking than we spent on the show. I've learned a lot about you. I've been transparent with you, I think. There's so much more than somebody's opinion or belief about something. That doesn't trivialize those beliefs. They're important to you, mine are important to me. But you don't have to like everything about somebody to like that person. You don't have to agree with somebody on everything to have a relationship with that person. That's what we've gotten away from in America. And then somebody will say, well, they want to kill babies. And I'm sorry, I don't want to have a cup of coffee with a baby killer. I get that that's an important issue, but there's more to that person than that point of view, and you'll never change their perspective if you don't talk to them.
So another personal example, I agree 100%. So we had that, that kind of debate at the beginning of this show about Israel, right? And so you see, I get emotional about it, I get passionate about it, I care deeply about it. That's real human beings' lives at stake, right? But I've got to be able to talk to you, Dr. Phil, because like you said, how in the world can we get to can you understand my position if you never heard my position? How in the world can you empathize with Palestinians if I haven't asked you to empathize with Palestinians, right? So what my side does far too often these days is Islamophobe. Okay, first of all, that's a word you made up. Okay, and it's fine, right? And we can call it, say different words, you can say bigger, whatever, right? But I don't know that they're really like homophobe. Are they really afraid of gay people? Are they afraid of Muslims? It's just kind of a weird word to begin with, right? But okay, fine. Yeah, I could do that. That's easy. Oh, well, you don't value Palestinian lives, and it's something I care about deeply and a super important issue. Islamophobe. Okay, then I feel better because I'm morally righteous and I'm morally superior to you, et cetera. Or maybe we talk it through, and maybe I didn't convince the great majority of the people listening to this podcast, but maybe 10 or 20% thought, yeah, come to think of it, if I was a Palestinian, that would be kind of brutal, right? And I don't know what they're supposed to do about it if they're occupied for all that time, right? So just like we said, the important issue isn't a particular subsidy or is the Pentagon spending this right or that right. It's the ability to ask questions. And the most important issue isn't either Israel or climate change or whatever it might be. The most important thing is to actually have the conversation so that we begin to understand one another. And at the end of it, maybe somebody goes, hey, I heard Muslims were scary and this and that, and I heard about the terrorism. That's what TV's been telling me for 30, 40, 50 years straight. What are they supposed to think, right? But I met Cenk, and it turns out he grew up Muslim, his family's Muslim. I'm an atheist now, so I can't win either way. But okay, but he doesn't seem like such a bad guy. He likes the Steelers. He likes Subs. I like Subs. I like the Cowboys. Maybe I should think about it differently. For God's sake, let's heal a little bit. Let's talk to each other.
Yeah, and I'm not the repository of all knowledge. I don't pretend that I'm right about everything. And one of the things that I'm proudest of is that every interview I do, my goal is to learn something. It doesn't matter who I'm talking to. I did an interview last week with someone that I really didn't want to do the interview. I didn't think it was going to add to what I had a pretty broad base of knowledge about something. I didn't think it was the best use of time. And the moral to the story. It was a highly productive interview. I got a lot of information I wasn't expecting to get. It was a different point of view, and I learned an awful lot about it. And I think it's one of the things that's kept me going all these years is to go in with a genuine curiosity and a willingness to try to learn by standing in another person's shoes and looking through it. And we need to do that more in this country instead of just, jumping to conclusions and wiping someone just completely off our social chart, moral chart, business chart, whatever. And sometimes it's identity politics. Sometimes it's just they're aligned with one group and you paint them with that whole group's brush. They may agree with one thing about that group and not 10 others. That's how they get swept up into being in that group. They might have agreed with one thing and then they got pulled into everything for that group. They may not at all feel that way. We need to talk in order to figure that out. I don't think we're as divided as the media paints everybody out to be. I just think we need to remind people of that and have them start inquiring and listening and saying, you know, I've taught a lot of negotiation, and you've actually referred to this a few times. The first thing I do when I'm talking to people about negotiating is, first thing I want to do is let's talk about everything we agree about. We can get to all the stuff we disagree about in a minute, or everything I want that you have and everything you want that I have. But first, let's talk about what we agree about. Man, once you do that, you find out that list is pretty long. And the things you disagree about can be a pretty short list. And you also find out that you value different things. So the currency value that I put on what I want might be a 10 to me and a 2 to you. So it's high value to me and an easy give for you. What I'm willing to give could be a 2 for me and it's a 10 to you. So, hey, we might find out it's an easy trade. And that can be something as simple as the kid that wants an extra hour on their curfew. And they find out the hour doesn't matter. My parents want to know I'm safe during that time. And they happen to know that most auto accident fatalities happen between 12 and 2 a.m. because that's when the bars let out and drunk drivers are on the road. They don't care if I'm out, they just don't want me on the road. So if I can listen to them and figure that out, now I can negotiate being out as long as I'm not on the road. So if people listen, they go, hey, they want different things than I do. We can make a trade here. It's even as simple as parents and kids negotiating. It's the same principle that holds between governments and in business. Fundamentals if people will just listen.
Look, that's indisputable common sense. The only way you dispute that is if you don't really want to get along, that you like the fight, and you want, and there's a certain emotional, psychological benefit you think you're getting out of that fight. So and again, always I have examples on both sides, but here in this case on the left, they say this has been very recent and to me, right? Don't go talk to Patrick Bet-David or Tim Pool or Dr. Phil or whoever, right? Because, and I said, well, wait a minute though. Do you know that they agree with us on anti-corruption? They really hate the corruption. They don't like the money in politics. It's no way that's true. They supported Donald Trump, and Donald Trump took all this money from Elon Musk and Miriam Adelson and Tim Mel, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I know. But so did Joe Biden. Joe Biden took all this money from ExxonMobil and Lockheed Martin, et cetera. They're like, hey, are you saying it's a moral equivalent? Yeah, I am saying that. So, I mean, both sides used to do this. Now, again, the right wing's gotten better on this, to be honest. So I would tell an NPR audience, for example, Mitch McConnell takes $1 billion from corporate donors over his career. Corruption, right? And they're like, oh, yeah, that guy's the worst. Definitely corruption. Now, Nancy Pelosi, did you know Nancy Pelosi has also taken $1 billion from almost the same donors throughout her career? Well, that's fine. She's one of the good guys. Our donors are good guys. Their donors are bad guys. No. Anyway, so when I say, look, they actually agree with us on corruption, they're like, no, you don't know that. There's no way I believe you. I think that they want to cut the Pentagon. There's no way I believe you. But how would you know? You haven't even talked to them. Our side hasn't talked to the right wing in 10 years, 20 years, just because it's easier to go fascist, racist, Nazi. Oh God, I feel so good. I did that release. And then they'll say, hey, but you can point to different things that people have done wrong. I know, and I do, right? So if I have a complaint about Donald Trump, I just say it. I say it about policy, like January 6th. So if it breaks your heart, sorry, but you're also in a bubble. And so, no, I vehemently disagree with what he did after the 2020 election. I could still have a conversation with the brother. I could still have a conversation with his supporters, because you don't know what you do agree on until you talk. And it turns out, as you said, in my experience, turns out we agree on a lot. We just didn't get there. We just never had the conversation. Here, last thing on that, Dr. Phil. Some folks, not because it's a conspiracy theory or they're doing it actively, but it's part of the groupthink. So in establishment media and establishment politics, they don't really want us to talk. And so, because if we talked, we'd both realize, oh, it's the money in politics. Now, why doesn't mainstream media want us to talk about that? Do you know who one of their top advertisers, is not the top advertiser? Politicians. So they take the 10, 20, 30 billion dollars that go into these elections these days, and almost all of it goes into ads on cable news, New York Times, Washington Post, etc. So if you find out that that money in politics that's going straight into that media's pocket is corruption, well, that's a serious problem for their business model. So the very last thing they want you to do is talk to one another. And what's a great way to drive a wedge between you guys so you hate each other and never talk? Well, they're literally called wedge issues.
Yeah.
Cultural issues, identity politics, etc.
That's why I say I think we're not as a country as divided as the media would paint it to be. But they certainly seem to fan those flames.